Hi, everyone, and welcome to our latest webinar. This is something that we like to call the Under the Hood series, brought to you by Orange Blade Consultants. We are your one-stop shopping for all things Bluebeam, from software to solutions and training. In this series, we like to provide a brief look into some of those features that are under the hood of Bluebeam Revu, and explore some of the less obvious features that aren't readily apparent when you first jump into the program. So as usual, we are recording this session, and within the next day, it'll be posted to orangeblade.com. Anyone who registered with us will get an email notification when the recording is available. Oh, and one last note, everyone on the webinar is in listen-only mode. And we don't really have an easy way to answer questions during the session, but that doesn't mean we don't like to hear your questions. So please send your questions to bluebeam@orangeblade.com, and we will get back to you with an answer. All right, so today's webinar is brought to you by the letter C. C stands for Cloud Plus, Capture, Count, and Custom Columns. It also stands for Cookie, but I don't think we have enough time to get into that. So we will just jump right in with our first feature, Cloud Plus. Okay, so when we are working on a plan sheet like this, we typically want to draw attention to something that needs attention, something that we want to mark up to show someone, or just even for ourselves, that there's a part of the plan sheet that we want to draw attention to. So we'll typically use the Cloud tool for something like that. Cloud tool is just one of our shape markups that we can use. We can just grab it right here from the Markup tab right on the command bar. And we can just draw a regular old cloud here to show that there's something here that needs some attention. Now the cloud tool is by itself, it's not really that useful, because we've just drawn an area here that we want someone to look at, but we haven't really said anything more than that. So one of the things we might want to do is to add a description to the cloud to make it more distinct. So we might use our text tool, the text box over here under the Markup tab. And if we just draw a text box on the page and then add some text here to describe what it is we want to draw attention to. All right, so let me just zoom in on that. And that gives us a little bit more of more description, something that makes it a little bit more distinct. And so that helps a little more. But, you know, if we're working with a drawing like this, there could be a lot of issues that we need to work on and draw attention to. And by itself, just drawing a text box and a cloud separately don't really, it doesn't really tell us that this piece of text here specifically applies to this cloud over here. Well, one way that we can connect these two together is to use the arrow tool. So we can just grab the arrow tool over from our lines pull-down menu and just draw an arrow from here to here, okay? And then that connects these two. So we get a better idea that this block of text here refers to this cloud. Well, now what I've just done here is I've created 3 different steps. These are 3 completely separate markups, and that's I mean, it's not a lot of work, but if you're working with hundreds of these markups, it adds up over time. And what happens if we move one of these clouds accidentally? These separate markups here are completely separate and discrete elements, so they're not connected to each other. So moving one doesn't necessarily connect or move the others as well. Well, one of the tools that Bluebeam uses to solve this issue of having 3 separate markups to accomplish one function is to combine the text box with the arrow. And this is a tool called the callout. So let me get rid of these two. And we'll go over here to our text pull-down menu and select callout. The callout combines the arrow tool and the text box by allowing us to point to position the arrowhead and then click one more time to position the text box. So I'll just start typing here. Okay, so now I have a text box along with an arrow tool, and that allows us to skip a step, which is great, but we still have 2 separate elements here. We have a cloud that is separate from the text in the callout. So to fix that, Bluebeam created a special tool called Cloud Plus, and that's the first feature that we're looking at today. So to create a Cloud Plus tool, we'll first get rid of these 2 elements, and then we'll go over to our Markup menu tab in the command bar, click on Shapes menu button, and select Cloud Plus. Now, the Cloud Plus allows us to draw a cloud first, so we'll position the cloud, and we'll draw it in the form of a rectangle like so. So that's the cloud. And now we have a callout or text that's connected to the cloud, but we can position in the same way that we positioned the callout tool. So we'll click one more time to position the text and start typing. Now that's one action, just like that. And if we want to move the whole thing at once, we can just click on the cloud and just move it as a complete unit. So we know that there won't be any problem with us moving the one element out of these 3 parts separately and messing up our communication. So that's how the Cloud Plus works in general. We first draw the cloud, and then we position the text box like a callout. So what we can do with this, beyond just simply positioning it on the page, is that we can add and change the properties of the Cloud Plus tool. Now, if you're new to Bluebeam, you might be unfamiliar with the way that Bluebeam uses the term properties. So what are properties? Well, properties are characteristics or information that's added to every markup that you add onto your PDF document. Now, we can get a really good example or good layout of what our properties look like by right-clicking on any markup and selecting Properties. And that will open up the Properties tab. Typically, we'll find it on the right-hand side panel. So when we look at this tab here, we can see what the properties of our Cloud Plus tool, and it's labeled here at the top. The program is smart enough to know that we're dealing with a Cloud Plus markup here, and it labels the Properties tab appropriately. So here's what we get with properties. We have a section here that determines the appearance of the property, how it looks, what color it is, what it's filled with. Well, right now we don't have any fill in this cloud area, so let's define a fill color so it pops a little bit more and gives us the ability to see it a little better on the page. So we'll change this to a yellow color. Now, when we do that, it fills it with this solid yellow color, and it blocks whatever's underneath it, including information that might be useful to us in the drawing. So what we'll want to do with this is to change the transparency or opacity, is how it's called in Bluebeam, and we'll change that to something less than 100%. So we'll just keep clicking this down arrow until we get the transparency we need, and 40% looks pretty good here. So this is enough to give us a good color that pops out and lets this markup stand out, but not enough to block what's underneath it. So that's great. Now we can also do the same with the text box. The text box is something that is defined separately from the cloud shape. And if we go down here to this call-out icon, we can define the fill color of the text separately. So we can change it to a different color if we want. We can make it green. But typically, we like using the same color so we know that the text relates to the cloud that is drawing attention to something that needs to be looked at. And we can also give the text a line width. Right now, it's currently set to 0 as a default, but if we raise this number, we can see that there's an outline that surrounds the text, and that makes it stand out a little more. Okay, so these are all examples of how the cloud appearance can be changed, but there's more to the properties of a markup than just its appearance. For example, and we can close these sections in the Properties tab by clicking on this arrow or this triangle button here, which collapses it. And we can look at some of these other options that we have here as well. We can look at this, the layout, which tells us where the positioning of the markup is. This tells us where exactly it is on the page. We can even show what its rotation is, currently set to 0, but if we wanted to rotate this markup for some reason, we can change it like so, and the rotation element gets changed as well. So, but kind of not very useful when we're dealing with cloud markups. Now, the really important thing that I want to point out here, and why I'm spending so much time on this, is what we have here in the General section. Now, up here, we have some very important data or very important information that gets added to the markup. We have the name of the author. That's me right there, and this is the name that I use as a default, what I use to log into my computer. We also have the contents of what's called the comment field. The comment field here is what you've added to the text box. So if we just had a cloud by itself, which I can just really quickly create here, type something in, like so, it's not visible on the screen like it is for a text box, but if I double click on it, it gives me this bubble that comes up that shows me what's in the comment field. Okay, so now that's just the comment field. Now, the more important issue that I want to show here is what's in the subject field. And the subject field is a text field that allows us to define a markup with important information, typically used for categorizing your markups. We can change this to something more that relates more to the work that's being done. So for here, we might want this to be something that gets categorized as repairs. So we might want to create a subject for repairs and then add that to the subject field. Now, what does this do for us? Well, this allows us to categorize our markups so that we can search for them later and even organize them. So as we add a markup like this to the page, we can look at our Markups tab down here at the bottom. This is a button here that opens up the markup list, which is kind of a spreadsheet-looking arrangement of all the markups that we've added to our document. And since we've created these markups that have been defined as repairs, we see that under the Subject tab, or under the Subject column, we can see that it's listed here as something that we can organize by. Now we can create a number of different subject types, and as we do that and populate them on the page, then it just gets easier and easier to search through the markup list. Okay, so that's how we can work with the Cloud Plus tool, and just like any other markup that we can create, we can add this tool that we've created with the subject line of repairs and save it permanently into a tool chest that allows us to recreate that element over and over again without having to redo it from scratch. So I've created this this Cloud Plus markup over here, and I can see that in my recent tools under the tool chest, it's been recorded by the program, and if I want to add this to an existing tool set, I'll just drag and drop it over to a tool chest that I created earlier, and then apply it to the page, and it's been defined with the subject that I created earlier. Now this is all going to pay off later when we talk about custom columns, which is why I'm spending so much time on it. But as you can see, the Cloud Plus tool is a very useful tool that allows us to combine multiple elements into one without having to keep track of 3 separate elements. So now let's take a look at the next C feature, which is the capture tool. Now let's say that we have a comment that we've added to the page here. Here's our wall issue that needs to be repaired, but it doesn't really tell us what the wall issue is or what it looks like. It would be really great if we added or could add an image to this, and we can do that typically by going over to the Markup menu tab and clicking on the image button, and when we do that, we can just embed an image right onto the page, like so. So that's how image markups work. Now this is a separate image markup, and it's something that is unrelated or not connected to the Cloud Plus tool that I created. So we have the same issue that we had before with having 3 separate elements to accomplish the same communication. So what we'd really like to do is to connect or to embed the image right into the markup, so that if one of these markups gets moved or nudged accidentally, we know that this image is directly connected to this markup. So how do we do that? Well, that's what the capture tool is supposed to accomplish. Now, to add a captured image to a markup, all we need to do is right-click on it and select Capture. Now, here we have, I'm working on a desktop computer right now, and I don't have a webcam attached to it. If I did have a webcam, we'd have multiple options when I hover over the capture item. And it'll look a little bit like this. I took this screenshot from my Surface Pro, and if I zoom in on this, you can kind of see. So this is what it'll look like if you are working on a computer that has a webcam on it. So this is great for your mobile users. You'll even see this on the iPad version of the Bluebeam Revu program. You can access your camera directly and take a picture right from the camera and embed it directly into your markup. So let's see what that looks like if we were to take this image over here, but instead of adding it separately as an image markup, I'll delete it, and then I'll right-click and select the file that the markup references. Now, look what happened here. Nothing really seemed to change except for this tiny icon that is in the corner of the text box portion of the Cloud Plus markup. But if I click on it, it gives me the image. Now, we can actually add more images, so we can get a sequence of images added to the same markup. So if I click on this button right here, I can add an additional image to that same markup, and this allows me to tab back and forth through the images by clicking on the left and right arrow buttons in the sequence. The program also gives you the number of images that we have in the capture through this information block right here. Now, if you have a webcam, you can also add images directly from this interface by clicking on the camera button here. So this would include platforms like the iPad or the Surface Pro or any kind of mobile computer like that. Now, the other thing that we can do from here is if we wanted to delete an image, we can just find the image we want to get rid of and then click on the trash button, like so. Now we have one image embedded in this capture. Okay, so, and again, this allows us to move the markup as a whole if need be, so there's no mistaking that all of these elements are connected together. Now, the other thing that this allows us to do, though, is by keeping that together, we don't really have any confusion when we look at the markup list. So if we were working with, say, 4 different elements, a cloud, a line, a text block, and an image, we would see 4 separate entries in the markup list. Here we just see one, and if we make the capture item or the capture column visible, so we'll go over here to the columns list and find the capture column, we can see which items, which markups in the markup list actually have captures associated with them. So this camera icon here tells us that there is a capture associated with this particular markup. Okay, so let's get out of that. And so that pretty much covers the capture. Now, this is just a way to make your comments on the page a lot easier to work with. So let's move on to the third C feature in Bluebeam Revu that we want to talk about today, and that's the count measurement tool. So the count tool is a special kind of measurement markup, which we can find here in our Measure tab up on the command bar. We have a lot of different options to choose from. We have most of the tools here embed a numerical piece of data into the text or into the markup. So if we're using something like a length measurement, we get length data, 12 feet 9 inches. But count measurement doesn't embed that kind of length or area measurement, but it does add numerical data. What it adds is a count. So we typically want to use the count tool if we're doing any kind of quantity takeoff. So if we're counting elements in our markups, we may want to use the count tool. So the way we use the count tool, the way that we use the count tool is to click on the count button and start clicking. So let me zoom out a little bit and find something worth counting here. Okay, so I'm going to click in these door areas over here, and notice what we get. We get a check mark for each door that I'm clicking on. Okay, now I'll hit the escape key and click on it again, and let's see what we find here. Now, what we get is in a count that's listed in the comment field of my count measurement. So again, this is a special kind of markup, but what it does is count the number of clicks that you make on the page. And in the Properties tab, we can see not only the number of counts that we have, but also what its appearance is. Now, we're not limited to just using red check marks. If we look in the Appearance section of the Count Measurement tab, we can see that we have 5 different options to choose from. And if I want to change this to a triangle or a square, it's pretty easy to do. I'll just click on it in the Appearance section, which might make you think, if you're doing a lot of different quantity estimations, are you just limited to 5 different visual cues for it, visual appearances? And of course, we can also change the color. So we can create not only red check marks, but we can also create green ones as well. So this allows us to expand the number of count types that we have by the number of shapes times the number of colors. But then we can also change the size of the count measurement elements. So if we change the scale field by clicking on the up or down arrow buttons, we can make these larger as well. So we have 3 dimensions that we're working with here: the shape, the color, and the scale or size of the count. Now, the Properties field also gives us a subject to work with as well. So just like we worked with the Cloud Plus tool, the subject field can be changed as well. So if we wanted to change this to something more descriptive, we could change this to something that might represent a material type. Here I'm going to use doorknobs, but you can use anything that you want. I'm counting doors here, so what I'm really doing is counting the number of doorknobs I need to outfit this floor. Now this allows me to then go into my markup list. As I expand the markup list, I can see here that the number of counts that I have is reflected in the comments field. Now, Review also gives us a special column that is dedicated to the count measurement tool. If we go to our columns menu and select count, we get an extra column, and the extra column is on the, let's see. Oh, there it is. Okay, so the count column gives us a number. Now, you might ask, why do we even want to bother with the count column if we have the number listed in the comments column? Well, typically we might want to export all of this information into Excel, and any information exported to Excel from the comments field is exported in the text format or a text data field. So this doesn't really represent a number. This represents the character for the number 5. Everything exported from the count column is actually a numerical data type. So this allows us to export it to a spreadsheet program and then do some kind of formula on it. Now, more on that in a minute, because we can actually talk about how we might want to do some of those calculations in the Bluebeam program itself using the last feature we're going to talk about today, which is custom columns. But before I leave the count measurement tool, I want to bring up a feature that was just added in the 2017 version of the program. I mentioned here that we're limited to the 5 shapes that were given as a default here, and even though we can expand the flexibility of these 5 basic shapes by using color and size, when you look at a plan sheet from kind of a bird's eye view, we start looking at a lot of these counts, and they start to blend in on each other, and it gets kind of to look like a mess. we might want to add something that looks more representative of what our counts actually are. Now, for years, users have been asking for a way to create a custom count icon to represent something closer to what the counts are supposed to be counting. So in 2017 version of Revu, they added the ability to create a custom count. Now, to do that, we first want to find an element that we might want to use, and this could be any kind of element. It could be a markup that you create or draw. It could be a snapshot taken from the page itself. I actually took this doorknob image from a website. Let me just zoom in on it, and you can see, well, that looks like a doorknob type, and I just added it to the page. Now from here, we need to turn it into a custom count. So how do we do that? Well, what we want to do is and there are actually a couple different ways we can do this, but the easiest way is to add this as a tool to an existing tool set. And as we know, when we create any kind of new markup in the Bluebeam program, it gets recorded under recent tools. So there's the image I added. And now I'm going to drag it. And actually, I think this is a little bit too big for the doors I'm working with here. So I'm going to make it even smaller. I'm just going to shrink it down a little bit, like so. And when I do that, the program made a recording of that size. So let's test that by clicking on it there and putting it on the page. So we know that that's the right size we want. So I'm going to drag this now. Actually, before I do that, I also want to change the subject name. So instead of image, I want it to say doorknob. Okay, now I'll go over here to recent tools, hover over on it, and it says, we can see the caption that says doorknob, and then I will now drag it from recent tools into an existing tool set, like so. Now it's not a count yet because I haven't turned it into a count, so I'm going to right-click on it and select this new option down here at the bottom labeled Create Count. Now it creates an icon here that looks the same as the element, and it has the numbers 1, 2, 3 in it, indicating that it is a count. Now, what I've also done here is demonstrated that when it does not inherit the subject property of the original element that it was created from. So we'll want to change this from the default count measurement subject to doorknob, and the easiest way to do that is to click on this gear wheel here on the tool set and change it from symbol to detail view. And here we can just double click into the field that we want to edit and then just change it to what we want it to be. So now I can click on this, and actually let me get rid of some of these other doorknob elements. Okay, now let's start using this count tool. So I'll click on it and now start clicking on the page. And as I do that, it's registering each count, each mouse click as a separate count. So I'll hit escape so that it gets committed to the page. And when I click on it again, we can see that it's listed as having 5 doorknobs in this count. And then I'll go to my markup list and see that it's listed under the count column. So that's how we can work with the count tool. I think that latest feature of adding a custom image is, again, it's a very long requested, long awaited feature that people have been asking for a long time. So it's great that it's now in the version of, or the most current version of Revu that we have. So now let's finally take a look at our last feature here, and this is the most complex one, custom columns. We've looked at how the properties for each markup work. We know that properties are really just extra information contained within every markup, and whether it's the position and page number of the markup or its appearance, or text information in the comment field or the subject field. Custom columns give us the ability to add even more information to a markup beyond the default properties that we're given to start out with. So let's take a look at our options. If we go to the markup list right now, remember the custom column menu, or the ordinary columns menu. This gives us a list of all the columns that we have. Right next to it is this gear wheel option. Now the gear wheel signifies typically that there's some kind of manager behind it. So if we click on it, we get the Manage Columns Manager. Now there's a tab here labeled Custom Columns. So if we click on that, what we can do here is define additional information that we can embed in every markup that we're working with. So this gives us a lot of different options. So actually, let me go over to this document here, and it'll be a little bit more explicit. So we'll go back to Manage Columns, Custom Columns. Now let's start out by clicking on the Add button. Now we have 6 different custom column types to work with. So I'm going to start by talking about the first 4, which are fairly easy. And then the last 2 need some more complex information, but those happen to be the most useful if we use them right. So we're going to talk about how, first of all, the checkmark column works. So we can create a custom column here that only has a binary option, an on or off. Now, why would we need something like that? Well, let's take a look here at the default checkmark option. If we click on it, it embeds a checkmark into it, telling us something. It could be whether the information's been looked at or whether it's been fixed. Anything that we can limit to an on or off option gives us the ability to quickly add that information to the markup. Now, the checkmark column is here as a default, but we have the ability to create our own checkmark columns, which we can give a specific name. So we can call this fixed. So this might tell us whether an item has been fixed or not. So if we change the type to checkmark and hit the OK button, we get a new column called fixed that we can just add a checkmark to. And the beauty of this is that with the other ways that we can use the markup list to sort and filter for specific properties for each markup, if we click on, let me just click a couple of these here. If we click on the top of the column, we can then sort all of our markups by the properties of that have been assigned to each markup for that column. So if I click on the top here, all of the checked items go to the top. So that might be one way we might want to use this kind of a feature. But that's fairly simple. So let's move on and look at other different custom column types. So the date option gives us the ability to embed a date into the markup. Now, by default, the date column will add the date of the markup's creation, which is typically how these markups tend to be used. But you could also use it for another purpose. You can embed a specific date. So I could put in, I could name this something like fixed deadline, and then change the default to a custom date, which can't be changed by the user. So let's say all all these items need to be fixed by a week from now. So I'll change that to the date. So all the markups that are added to the file will get that same date added to it. So this gives us the ability to embed a specific date instead of one that was added at the creation of the file, or at the creation of the markup. Okay, so that's the date column, or the date custom column type. Now let's take a look at the text and number option. So this allows us to add information that is either in a number or a text format. So as an example, if we have, if we want to add information that's in the form of text, like somebody's name or a part type, we can use that, and we can give it a default option so that it's automatically added with that that custom column when the markup is created. So all markups with that get added to this page will have that that text added to it. But we can also leave this blank. And if I just create a column here called responsibility and leave it as text. Now if I go to the responsibility column, I can actually double click on this and add somebody's name. So here's here are architect column comments that were made. So I can just add somebody's name to it to make sure that they review it. Okay, so that's one way we can use this kind of a field, but this gives us a lot of flexibility because it's just really an empty column until we double click on it and add something. So we can do the same thing with the number field. So if I go back to the Custom Columns tab, if I change this to number, we have a few more options here, but what this allows us to do is add numerical information in any number of different formats here. So this could be a strict number, which could include an integer or a certain number of decimal places, or we can choose a currency or a percentage. Now these two items here will give us a prefix that that looks like a $sign if we use that particular currency type, or any number of different options that we have as well, or a percentage option, which just gives us a percentage prefix or suffix. So this allows us to add material costs to the column as well. So now, but keep in mind that this is a property that we're adding to the to every markup in this document. So every markup will have that information in it. If we just want to leave it as is, this gives us the ability to, let me just add in something, a name for this. We'll call it material cost. And we can give it a default, but that default will be applied to everything. So if we leave it at, if we leave default unchecked and hit the OK button, they're useful, but the real meat of custom columns is in the last two features that we want to look at. Okay, I heard that we had some audio problems now, but I think we can, yeah, I think we can all be, everyone can hear me now. So, so now we're going to talk about the last two features, the formula custom column type and the choice column type. So the first thing we're going to look at is the choice type. Now, choice gives us the ability to populate a number of options to choose from. So instead of, as in the case of the text custom column type, where we're manually entering in information, we can pre-populate all that information into a list of items that the user can choose from. So let's say, for example, and we'll just use the responsibility option again, but instead of using the type or the text option, we'll choose the choice option instead. Okay, so let's add a couple of users that we want to have here. We want to add information to this list, so we'll hit the Add button, and then I'll start by adding some names, because if we want to make this a responsibility column, we want to use a list of names to choose from so that they'll be highlighted for those particular users to look at to perform an action. So we'll start off with this name, and if we just leave the subject list blank, and let me just add one more name here so we can see what the choice menu looks like. Okay, so that's our responsibility list. I'm going to hit the OK button. And now if we want to add more information to the responsibility list, we can double-click on an empty space for a particular markup, and we get our two options here. And this applies to any markup in the list. So I'll go down here to one of the electrical items, double-click on it, and I have those two to choose from. Now, what we'd really like to do here is limit the choices so that they're dependent on the subject property. So if I go back to the Columns Manager and then click on Responsibility and hit Modify, what I'd really like to do is to make sure that these guys are only limited to markups that have architecture in the subject line. So I'll go back here and hit the Modify button, and then I'll add, make sure that I'm spelling this right. And make sure that he's limited to the electric subject type. Okay, so now I'll go over to one of my architect options, double click on it, and we'll see that we only have the two that I assigned for the architect subject. Now if I scroll down to the electrical, actually I spelled that wrong, so let me demonstrate what this looks like. If I double click on this, I don't have any options at all. So I'll have to go back here to the Columns Manager and change the responsibility option from electric to electrical. Now if I go back to the electrical comment and double click on responsibility, then I get the choice that I'd opted for. Now, hopefully you can see that there's a lot of options we can use this for. We're not just limited to responsibility, we can also be limited to, or we could also expand our use for this for material types. And one example of that is something that I have here in my tool set. Let me just close this down for a second. The page, like so, have specific subject types on them. Now, from these subject types, I can then create a list of choices to choose from because this might represent a category of material types, and I'd want to choose from that category to apply them to these particular counts. Now, to do that, I'd have to create a pretty extensive list, and for this example, fortunately, I actually did that. So I'll go over here to the Columns Manager and hit the Import button. So this allows us to, when we create our long list of choices or any other custom column types that we created, we can actually export those to a list that can be imported into any other document that you create. So I'm going to click on the Import button here and find the custom columns I created earlier. And we can see that I've got a large list of options here. So if I go just to examine how many items I have in here, I'll click on this option here and click on the Modify button. We can see that I've got a large list of options here, each representing a tool that I created earlier with specific subject types. So let's look at this as an example. I'll hit the OK button, and then I'll look at the count that I created over here. Now I can go over to the item list and double click on it, and I have all these options to choose from, which have been predefined in an earlier document and then imported into this one. Now, this gives us, again, a lot of options on how we can organize and categorize our the markups that we created. But furthermore, we can even perform calculations on them, and that brings us to the last item on our list, the formula option. So I'm going to go over here to the Manage Columns button and go back to Custom Columns. Now I've created a formula here called cost. Now what does formula do for us? Well, it allows us to make numerical calculations, mathematical calculations based on arithmetic functions and algebraic functions that draw information from other markups that we might have created on the page. So let's take a look at this one. I'll click on it and hit the Modify button. We can see that what we're doing here is taking whatever numerical content we have in the item list and multiplying it by the count that we made. So here I made a count of 3 items. What I need to do is draw the information from the item itself. Whatever number is embedded in there, I'll multiply by the number of counts that I've made, and then I'll get the material cost in this particular currency set to 2 decimal places. So what does that look like? Okay, so I'm going to hit the OK button now. If we go back to the item column and click on Modify, we can see that each of these items have a number associated with them. That number represents the unit cost. So if we are working on this, as we are building this list, we need to come up with the name of the item. So we'll just pick this one first, hit the Modify button. We can see that we've named it this item here. We've given it a descriptive name. We've limited the choice for this item to appear only under markups that have this particular subject associated with it. And we've also assigned a unit cost or a numeric value, which we've added the number 37 to, or $37 per unit. Okay, so now that we've done that, we can start applying our counts to the page. All right, and now once we've added the count to the page, we'll go down here to the markup list, find the one that we just created, and then choose the item from the list. And there it is right there. And when we do that, it takes the number that's been associated with it, the number 37, multiplies it by the count, and then gives us a material cost. And that's really it. So this kind of brings it all together using the count measurement tool along with our custom columns and the ability to work with properties in our markups. And that pretty much comes down to how the amount of flexibility that we have in the program by digging deeper into it. Well, that takes us to the end of our webinar. So I just want to make a couple of announcements here. And let me just close this down a little bit and go to the next page. All right, well, thanks for attending, everybody. We, again, like I mentioned earlier, we recorded this webinar. And so take a look for the recording on orangeblade.com or Facebook and Twitter. We'll have it out within the next day. But I also wanted to announce that Orange Blade is offering a new service. We can build custom interactive stamps. We have a Java programmer on retainer, and we can help define what you need in your custom stamps and then build that out for you. So if that's something that's interesting to you, if that's something you might find useful, let us know, and we can hook you up. We are also going to be at the Bluebeam Extreme Conference in August, so we will be making those. We will be making our presence known through all kinds of social media. So, so take a look at our Facebook page or our Twitter accounts, and we will be announcing where we'll be there. Finally, take a look and see if you're a premium maintenance user. Make sure that you get your free upgrade to Review 2017. Started talking about some of the new features in 2017. If you are a premium maintenance user, you are entitled to a free upgrade, so take a look at that. So finally, we are, as always, Bluebeam Platinum Reseller, and we offer guaranteed best pricing for Bluebeam software. So you can talk to us about getting volume discounts or even education discounts. We offer web-based or live training. So talk to us about that. We customize our training for whatever you need based on what your particular workflows are. So you're not spending a lot of time working on kind of a canned presentation. We make sure that we tailor it to what you need. So our contact information is on this page. Feel free to talk to us. Again, you can find us on Facebook and Twitter, but you can also reach us at bluebeam@orangeblade.com. There's our telephone number. Hope you had an informative webinar and hope to see you at the next one. Thanks a lot and goodbye.